Imagine carrying a key in your pocket for years, a key that can open a door you didn't even know existed, but that hides the very life you've always sought. Now imagine discovering that it can be rotated in just 40 days. Sounds bold? In the world of Jewish wisdom, this is not an exaggeration. It is a cycle. Because there, transformation was never seen as a desperate race, but as a crossing. A journey that begins when you stop looking outside for answers and decide to create space inside. Most people spend their lives waiting for big changes to happen over long periods, as if it took a full decade to get out of place. But the Torah teaches differently. It reveals that there are spiritual codes that, when applied with truth and intention, activate visceral changes in concentrated time, and one of the most potent is the 40-day cycle. In the desert, it was 40 years. In Sinai, 40 days of ascent. In the sacred calendar, 40 days precede the greatest moments of return, healing, and revelation. The number 40, for the Jewish people, carries a frequency of rebirth. It is the time of tikkun, of internal reconstruction. And here, we will apply this in your financial field. Not with empty promises, but with a solid foundation. What you're going to see today isn't a get-rich-quick technique. It is a path. A spiritual and practical journey that shows you, step by step, how the Jews have used this principle for centuries to unlock not only material scarcity, but also emotional stagnation, invisible blockages, and the fear of prospering with purpose. What you are about to receive is not content. It's a map, a 40-day code divided into blocks that activate your mind, your spirit, and your actions so that money is no longer a burden and become flow again. Because prosperity doesn't come suddenly. It comes when you become someone who can sustain it. And this transformation begins now. Being a part of this journey is like sitting at the table of an age-old tradition that not only teaches you how to make money, but how to conduct money with dignity, direction, and purpose. Each teaching you will access here comes from a source that has spanned centuries, sustained entire families even in times of crisis, and formed minds that see prosperity as an extension of spirituality. Being in this space is more than watching a video. It is being part of a community that walks with awareness, that honors ancestral knowledge, and applies true wisdom in everyday life. Therefore, being subscribed to this channel is almost like having your ear attentive to the voice of a master who, in each episode, delivers a living code. Click the button and sign up, because here you are not only learning about money, you are relearning how to live with purpose. For centuries, Jewish wisdom masters have taught that there are certain numbers that not only symbolize but carry living spiritual codes. And among them, the number 40 is perhaps one of the most powerful. It appears repeatedly in the scriptures, not by chance, but because it represents a complete cycle of transformation, a sacred window in time where the sky curves over the earth to allow a reunion with who you really are. When Moses went up to Sinai to receive the Torah, he spent 40 days in fasting and silence, receiving not only commandments, but a new perception of reality. That wasn't just a retreat, it was an internal crossing. The same duration appears in the flood, when the earth was covered by water for 40 days and nights. It was the erasure of the old world so that a new order could emerge. Later, we see this number reappear in the 40 years in which the Hebrew people walked through the desert, freeing themselves from the slave mentality to build an identity as a free and prosperous people. These examples are not old stories to be read from a distance. They are maps. They are like spiritual signs pointing out that 40 days represent much more than a month and a half on the calendar. They mark enough time to break patterns, purify emotions, change belief systems, reorganize the soul, and create a new inner space for the blessing to arrive, not just as a miracle, but as a consequence. And within Judaism, this number also appears in the 40 days leading up to Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the calendar. It is a period of teshuvah, of return to the essence, where each person is invited to make an honest balance of their own life and decide clearly what stays and what needs to go. It is at this very point that the Jewish principle of prosperity begins to reveal itself. You don't transform your finances just by changing how much you earn or save. You start by changing how much you transform yourself as a spiritual being dealing with money. Because the 40 days were not created to change what is outside, but to clean and expand the space where the world will meet you. And that space is you. It all starts in this invisible territory that is your emotional field, your mind, your way of seeing money, of talking to it, of positioning yourself in front of it. When you enter this cycle with awareness, what you are saying to the universe is, I am available to be another. And this statement carries enormous spiritual weight. It's like digging a new channel through which water can flow. Therefore, within the Jewish tradition, many turning processes involve this 40-day cycle, because it is not enough to want. It is necessary to sustain the process of recreation with discipline, focus, and reverence. And this goes for everything: to rebuild a relationship, to heal a loss, to create a new financial cycle. The Torah does not deliver shortcuts, it delivers codes. And the code of 40 carries in itself the secret of crossing with a certain destination. You enter in a way and leaves ready for a new level. There is a practice within Judaism that few people know about outside of yeshivot, outside of the cycles that really live wisdom, but which is one of the most transformative tools when it comes to changing reality. Her name is Hishtadlut. It's not just thinking. It is not simply reflecting on something. Hishtadlut is the profound act of contemplating, to look inside so closely that you begin to see what was previously invisible. It is the moment when the external world falls silent and the true map of transformation is revealed, the one that is within you. Hishtadlut comes from the Hebrew root binah, which is linked to deep understanding, to the wisdom that connects. And more than a mystical meditation, this practice is a kind of spiritual fine-tuning. It is like a mirror that only reveals the marks of the soul when you look with courage. The masters teach that before any action in the physical world, this moment of silence with direction, of introspection with purpose, is necessary. And this is true for all areas of life. But it has a particular impact on finances, because money is often the direct reflection of the internal state of those who move it. Within the routine of many practicing Jews, Hishtadlut is done before work, or at the end of the day, or before making an important decision, but not as someone who seeks ready-made answers, but as someone who wants to align intention, vision, and conduct. They ask themselves, what inside me is misaligned with what I want to attract? What part of my speech, my behavior, or my mentality is taking me away from the parnassah that is already available, but I still can't access? This practice of self-observation then becomes an axis of correction, because when the soul corrects the course, reality follows. Imagine an entrepreneur who, on the outside, is doing everything right: strategy, effort, networking, investments, but something doesn't work. He feels that he is stuck, that business stalls, that opportunities slip away, and instead of increasing speed, he decides to stop for a moment. Not to give up, but to observe. He makes Hishtadlut. He sits down with his notebook, writes down what he feels when the money comes in, what he thinks when the money goes out. He begins to notice an invisible pattern. Every time he receives a larger amount, he feels guilty. Every month when paying your bills, an inner voice repeats that you are always in debt, even when it is not. And that voice comes from afar, perhaps from childhood, perhaps from upbringing, perhaps from an ancestral belief that he never questioned. By naming this, something inside him changes. The energy with which he begins to deal with money is no longer one of tension, but of clarity. He does not change the strategy, but the field changes, and the field changes the results. It is at this point that Hishtadlut ceases to be introspection and becomes spiritual reprogramming, because what you observe with truth, you transform with action. In Jewish wisdom, this practice is deeply linked to the idea that there is no outer change without a new inner vision. What you don't see governs you. What you see with courage, you can choose to transform. Money then ceases to be a destination you pursue and becomes a reflection of the internal place from which you operate. It becomes a consequence of your alignment with the truth, and this truth is only revealed to those who have the courage to look inside. When the Torah talks about the 40 days that Moses spent on Mount Sinai, the text does not describe just a waiting or an ordinary preparation. That was a collective Hishtadlut process. As Moses delved deeper into the divine presence, The people needed to make their own internal movement, to observe what they still carried from Egypt within them, the fears, the emotional bondage, the reactive habits. This is exactly what happens with our finances as well. Sometimes we want the abundance of Sinai, but we are still responding to life as if we were in the wilderness. And without this deep pause to see what needs to come out, there is no room for the new to arrive. This is the point where many people get lost. They confuse action with acceleration. They want to solve their finances with more work, more effort, more control, but they don't stop to realize where they are operating from internally. That's why Hishtadlut has so much power, because it creates a type of space that few have the courage to access, the space of truth without filter. It is there that you begin to identify, for example, the pattern of sabotage that always prevents you from holding money, or the unconscious fear of earning more than someone in your family, or the way you punish yourself instead of allowing yourself to prosper. It is in this inner place that true teshuvah begins, the return to essence. And this return is not religious, it's financial too. Because money, in the Torah, is a tool of reparation, and there is no external repair without internal correction. When you dedicate yourself to Hishtadlut for 40 days, even for 10 minutes a day, something starts to move, not in others, on you. And this is enough to change the course of an entire story. A real example of this comes from a woman named Yael, a financial therapist who served many entrepreneurs, but who was never able to truly prosper with her own work. Until, guided by a rabbi, she began to practice Hishtadlut every morning. Not long prayers, not requests, just internal listening. Every day, before opening her cell phone, she sat down with a notebook and answered 3 questions. How do I feel when I talk about money today? What does my mind repeat when I think about receiving more? What part of me still believes that prosperity is not secure? In 40 days, Yael not only unlocked her winnings, she redefined the way she positioned herself in the world. She began to charge with dignity, to organize her energy and routine more clearly, and above all, to talk about wealth with an inner peace she had never experienced before. The crossing of the 40 days did not give her an immediate miracle, but it returned the spiritual realm she had outsourced to fear. This is the kind of transformation that you can also experience, and the path does not begin with a new course, nor with an external tool. It starts with a mirror, a moment of silence, a dive into what tradition calls binah, the wisdom that comes from listening. Because there is no point in repeating positive phrases without observing the negative beliefs that still govern you. There is no point in looking for more without cleaning what is already there blocking. Hishtadlut is the first step of the crossing. The map is drawn day after day as you learn to see what you previously ignored. Clarity in this process is worth more than any spreadsheet. Then write here in the comments a phrase that can mark this beginning for you. It can be something like, I choose to observe with truth, to transform with awareness, because to declare is to start building. And in the next excerpt, we will delve into how to turn this observation into a practical daily plan, using principles from the Torah itself to restructure your financial life in 40 days of conscious crossing. Every spiritual crossing needs a map, and Jewish tradition understands this with millennial precision. Throughout the Torah, 40-day cycles mark moments of profound turning. But those 40 days have never been a passive time. They have always been a journey divided into milestones, almost like internal stations that prepare the individual to cross from one state of consciousness to another. When we look at financial life with this same look, everything changes, because money ceases to be an end and becomes a reflection of the spiritual structure that you are building, brick by brick, day after day. That's why the 40-day challenge isn't a marathon. It is a deliberate construction, and it starts with an essential block, the first 10 days. This is the time of diagnosis and cleaning. The Torah teaches that before building the Mishkan, the holy space, the people had to remove the residues of Egypt that they still carried inside. With money, it's the same thing. What do you still bring from unconscious inheritances that sabotages your financial freedom? In these first days, the task is not to earn more, but to see more. Observe which phrases repeat themselves in your mind when you think of wealth. Recognize which behaviors have become automatic, and where you are still acting out of fear, scarcity, or comparison. Each day, write down a sabotaging phrase that comes up and rewrite it in its true spiritual version. As it is in Mishlei, Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Your reprogramming starts here. So we enter on the 11th to the 20th, and here the focus is on redefining the financial purpose. Because there is no elevated Parnassa without direction. Money, in order to maintain itself, needs purpose. And what moves money is not just strategy, it is clarity. During this time, daily practice revolves around writing, even one sentence a day, about why you want more abundance. But beware, it is not worth writing ready-made sentences. It has to come from the soul. Something like, I want to prosper to open opportunities to others, or I want freedom to live with integrity and presence. You can also use Torah verses as anchoring, such as Psalm 90:17, and let the grace of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. That's the energy of these days, turning intention into direction. Each block of the walk is accompanied by 3 elements that activate spiritual transformation in a practical way: a micro-action, a short meditation, and a mindful verbal blessing, milim tovat. This means that even with a busy routine, you can move toward the new with consistency and spirituality. Micro-action can be something as simple as organizing an area of your financial life that you avoid, reviewing an automatic spending, or writing a difficult email that you've been putting off. The meditation can be 3 minutes of breathing with a verse and the verbal blessing, a phrase said aloud with intention such as, I am a channel worthy of sustenance with awareness. These small practices generate large movements because they transform your frequency before transforming your numbers. With the first 20 days focused on clearing the ground and aligning purpose, the 21st to 30th open a new layer of the journey, the alignment between intention, words, and actions. At this stage, it is no longer enough to reflect. It's time to live what you've written, verbalized, and recognized as inner truth. The Jewish tradition teaches that words have the power to construct realities, and this is only accomplished when there is coherence between what is declared and what is done. Therefore, during this cycle, the focus is to observe every small gesture of daily life that can be realigned with your new financial code. From how you talk about money with other people, to how you react to unforeseen financial events. The daily question should be, is this action in harmony with the abundance I want to sustain? Each of these 10 days, the proposal is to choose a behavior and transform it into an act of conscience. For example, if you usually avoid looking at your bank statement, one day is dedicated to that, not as punishment but as reparation. If you find yourself complaining about spending, turn that impulse into a blessing. Say, Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name, for the resource you're going to. Use Psalm 19:15 as an anchor. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in the sight of you, O Lord. Because it is no use asking for blessings with the lips, while the body repeats habits that repel them. This is the stage where your spirituality begins to occupy the body. And then we get to the 31st to the 40th, the last 10, where everything that has been reviewed, felt, and aligned needs to become concrete planting. Because without planting, there is no harvest. These are the days of contribution, of intentional sowing, of the courageous choice to generate value. Here come the visible actions: offering help to someone with your expertise, investing in knowledge that expands your financial awareness, starting a partnership on purpose, organizing a recurring contribution to a cause that represents the world you want to strengthen. It is at this time that you apply the principle of Hishtadlut, with kavanah, the effort with deep intention. It is the action in the physical world that bears the stamp of the spiritual world. During these last few days, keep a journal where you write, at the end of each journey, today I was a valuable channel when, and complete it with the action you did. It may seem simple, but this gesture activates the internal recognition that you are becoming the person capable of sustaining what you asked for in the first few days. And it is this awareness that sustains the miracle. Remember the story of the desert crossing? The children of Israel only arrived in the promised land when they stopped being just survivors of Egypt and began to act as builders of a new reality. That's exactly what these last 10 days invite you to do. Each phase of the journey can and should be accompanied by a verbal affirmation of power, milim tovot, spoken aloud with the same faith that a psalm is sung. A phrase like, "I am worthy of channeling resources for good," or "My presence sustains abundance with lightness," changes the surrounding field. Because the Torah does not separate spirituality from practice. It teaches you that a crossing is only complete when the soul changes and the feet move together. When someone truly enters a 40-day cycle with spiritual awareness, what happens is not just what the eyes can see. Transformation begins behind the scenes of the soul, in the hidden corners of the mind, where there was once haste, fear, or denial. And so what you should expect in the early stages is not an explosion of instantaneous miracles, but a series of subtle, profound signs that indicate that the field is moving. One of the first signs is clarity. It doesn't come with fireworks, but with that inner silence that allows you to see what you once avoided. It's as if someone cleaned the window glass and suddenly you could see the paths more clearly. Things you tolerated, standards that felt natural, beliefs that went unnoticed. Everything begins to emerge. This can cause discomfort, and that's okay. Because in Judaism, discomfort is a sign that the container is expanding. And that's where the concept of kli comes in, the spiritual vessel. Each day of your journey is shaping this inner kli. And in order that it may contain greater blessings, it must be stretched, enlarged, refined. It is no different from when you prepare a new pot to plant something precious. You need to remove impurities, adjust the space, prepare the soil. In the same way, the soul goes through this invisible process of enlargement to sustain what did not fit before. And you know what else comes up? Unexpected opportunities. Invitations that seem simple, but carry within them seeds of growth. A conversation that awakens you, content that arrives at the right time, a reunion that provokes you. These are not accidents. They are answers, but they only arrive because behind the scenes you changed your field, and the spiritual universe responds to the new vibration. Many people tell me that during this cycle, tests arise, not in the punitive sense, but as training. Situations that would once take away peace now serve as a mirror to show you are more prepared. That's why it's important to always remember, you're not being tested, you're being trained. Each challenge that appears during this crossing is, in fact, a confirmation that your new you is emerging. And this new version is lighter, more intentional, more connected to the truth of your soul. Some days will seem ordinary, and that's where the biggest danger lies, thinking that nothing is happening. But remember something fundamental to Jewish wisdom. The greatest transformations happen in the occult. It's like the growth of a tree. You don't see the root forming, but that's where the strength is born. With every small step, with every word chosen with more awareness, with every action of generosity or self-control, you are saying to the spiritual world, I am ready to sustain what I once only dreamed of. You have come this far because something inside you recognizes this truth. Because this journey we're on together isn't just about transforming finance. It's about transforming consciousness. Every word I share carries generations of Jewish wisdom, time-tested spiritual codes, which are now at your fingertips. Valuing this knowledge is also a way of blessing the path that is opening up. So, leave your mark with a like on this video. This gesture, as small as it may seem, sustains this space for growth, honors study, and allows this message to reach more people who, like you, are ready to rebuild their lives with purpose. There was a man named Avi, born into a traditional community, but raised far from the deep spiritual practices that had sustained his ancestors. From a young age, he believed that prosperity came from constant effort, waking up early, sleeping late, closing contracts with a firm hand and a calculated smile. And for a while, it worked. Avi accumulated, invested, climbed, but at some point, no one knows exactly when, everything began to empty inside. The bills were full, but he was empty. It was like someone carrying a leaky jar. The more it is filled, the more it is lost on the way. It was on Yom Kippur that everything changed. Not because he fasted, This he already did by tradition, but because, for the first time, he allowed himself to be silent. In the midst of that silence, he remembered the words that his grandfather said to him in a low voice before going to sleep. The blessing only remains where there is a container, and the vessel is the clean heart. From that day on, Avi not only resumed practices he had left aside, but also entered a 40-day cycle with the principle of lihitbonen, reflective meditation. And what seemed too mystical, too abstract, became too concrete. Customers came back to him after months. An old idea began to bear fruit, and most of all, the relationship with money became light, for the first time in his life. But what really changed was not his company, it was the lens, because he stopped seeing money as a goal and started seeing it as a means, the means by which he could serve, grow, and repair. What was once a strategy has become a mission. What was pressure became direction. That kind of story isn't in the headlines, but it is in the eyes of those who decide to live with truth. It is behind the scenes of many who seem lucky to the outside eye, but who in intimacy practice millennial codes as if taking care of a flame that they cannot extinguish, because they know prosperity that sustains is that which comes after a crossing, never before. And when you understand that, something inside you changes as well. Because Avi's story deep down is about each one of us, about when we will stop running in circles and finally enter a path that has direction, purpose, and soul. Getting this far, you are not just facing another tip or suggestion. It is facing a turning point. The 40 days are not an external challenge. They are an internal pact. And every sacred journey begins with a symbolic act. That is why, from this moment on, you will consecrate your crossing with something that represents this commitment. It can be a notebook reserved just for your insights. It can be a stone that you bring from the street, wash it, and place it on your table as an anchor. It can be a candle lit for a few minutes before writing down your intentions for the day. It doesn't matter what, it matters why. Because this symbol will be the silent reminder that you have begun something that most postpone for a lifetime, the reconstruction of your financial reality on a spiritual basis. Within the Jewish tradition, nothing begins automatically. Everything is intentional. The creation of the world, according to the Torah, began with words, but also with separations, cycles, pauses, and activations. That is why you are going to declare, even today, a phrase that already opens space in the invisible field: prosperity with soul. Repeat this phrase out loud. Write on your symbolic object. Put it next to your name in the notebook. Make it your personal seal. Because this kind of word, spoken with kavana, with true intention, has more force than many well-thought-out plans. And as this journey is not made alone, this is where the sense of community is also born. Here, every step you take activates the field of those who are also walking with awareness. So it makes sense to be subscribed to this channel. Because what we build here is not content, it is identity. It's a place where you learn to grow with faith and wisdom, not with despair and comparison. A place where abundance is built from the inside out. And every like you leave is a way to sustain that living space. Not just for you, but for those who are yet to arrive and need it as much as you needed it. Now take a deep breath, because in the next video, you will learn about something that many people have never stopped to observe. The impact that words have on money, according to the Torah. Words that accelerate, words that block, words that program your soul to receive. And you'll understand why certain verbal codes change your financial reality, even before money comes along. It's the next step on that journey, and it's powerful. I'll meet you there.